And we were actually talking about, we're we're not very good at our job because it is still like this, even though we're not working on Turkey, but that was 10 years ago, and he's still in power and nothing has changed. And people will most likely re-elect him. And they re-elected Trump. They voted for Brexit at that 10 years ago. And still nothing has changed. Populist anti-EU rhetoric is still something that is not proven wrong enough, although it has been catastrophic for the UK and its economy. In this case, I think I'm not so optimistic, and we live probably in the worst case scenario at the moment. I have to say, okay, it can always get worse.
Hi everyone, Rod Berger here. I've been incredibly fortunate over the years to capture the stories of global icons, Hall of Fame athletes, entertainers, NGO leaders, and political figures. I've traveled the world and back again, and you know what? I think it's time to shed light on the scribes of our time, those who have contributed to communities across our planet, securing opportunities for the disenfranchised, denying affronts to democracy, and establishing secure passage through choppy geopolitical seas. It's time to learn about the people behind the pens of policy and the keystrokes of democracy. Join me as we go behind the scenes with government and military leaders, cabinet members, visionaries, and sought-after intelligence officers. Let's go beyond the headlines to discover the bylines of our times. This is the Dr. Rod Berger Show, presented by Fair Observer. Welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Rod Berger Show, presented by Fair Observer. If you're looking for independence, diversity, and debate, go to fairobserver.com. Understand the world one perspective at a time. You can check out my book, The Narrative Edge, Authentic Storytelling That Meets the Moment by Wiley, wherever books are sold. Recently, as we've launched our second season with Fair Observer, I have been interviewing people that are, let's say, in the U.S., we would say in the back nine of their career, sort of a golf adage. And it was about excavating a life and a legacy. And today we want to sort of jump into the middle and understand where passion lies, not just locally and from one's heritage, but also regionally, and the ripple effect of impact and influence we can have when we speak up and we take ownership of our voice. We're spending time today with Sebastian Schäffer. He's the director of the Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe, better known as the IDM, a regional think tank based in Vienna. He also serves as Secretary General of the Danube Rectors Conference, the DRC, a network of more than 60 universities in the wider Danube region. In 2011, this Munich-born political scientist founded SSC Europe, a competence network for seminars, simulations, and consulting. Sebastian has held several positions as a lecturer and research fellow at universities and institutions in Germany, where he also earned 2 master's degrees. His areas of expertise include European integration, EU enlargement, and future scenarios. He's the author of more than 100 articles and papers, and he's written as well as edited several books, among them Ukraine in Central and Eastern Europe. Sebastian, it's so nice to spend some time with you. You are a very busy man.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to talk to you.
Well, I've seen several of your interviews. I appreciate your passion and your conviction. I want to start with this, and I didn't know I was going to start with this, but I'm inclined to. This notion of impatience, but productive impatience, and that's the sensibility I get from researching you, and I applaud that. And maybe that's because, and the bias on my side of the table is, I live in a country, and especially a state, where we have, sadly, fantastic apathy, if that's even a way to put it, when it comes to participating in civics, participating in the way in which the engine moves and works and operates and impacts people and communities. You, on the other hand, have been, in my estimation, 2 and 3 chess moves ahead. And I'm wondering where we can talk about the specific of that, in a bit, but where did that come from? Because, and we'll talk about your mentor and some other elements, but I would imagine as a young boy, there had to have been signs that either came from family or circumstance. Help me understand the role impatience has played productively for you.
Thank you. This is a very interesting question to start off, and it's hitting something. I have to say, I never really thought about it, that this comes from childhood maybe, but I guess it's something that what I do remember is that I was a very sore loser. So for me, it was when we would play like board games and I wouldn't win. I couldn't handle that well. And this is something that my mom still tells me from time to time, that when we were playing this and then I would get angry about it. And I don't know if this is also some like the root cause of impatience, because I still don't like to lose when I watch my favorite football team, but I also, to a certain extent, I think things need to move forward, and things need to progress. And when I finish one thing, I already think about the next thing. And this is something that is very true. And where it exactly comes from, that impatience, I don't know, maybe the need to prove oneself also. I do not come from a family that has an academic background. I'm the first and only person to visit university. Maybe there is something where you have to sort of prove to the others that you belong to this world because you're not from it or something like that. Maybe that would be something. That's my kitchen psychology.
It's fascinating. And what I love, Sebastian, is look, two things can be true at the same time if we sort of step back and examine something from 10,000 feet. But what's fascinating is you talked about always wanting, sort of this perpetual motion, like there should be motion. We should be moving forward, right? And that is definitely and very clearly displayed in the work that you do publicly and for the region that you represent. But what's fascinating is, scenarios, right? That's an area of expertise, your ability to build and understand scenarios. And I would argue, if we were having a pint, we were, talking about it, I would say, well, Sebastian, help me understand. If I would think that those that are really good at sort of understanding, constructing, and manipulating, not in a negative or pejorative manner, but in understanding the shifting of variables and the impact, that there's a degree of stillness that you have to employ to be able to understand how that scenario may or may not play out. Otherwise, you run the risk of running a scenario and basically bypassing some critical observations of variables that you might have seen had you slowed down. How do you understand, or how do you relate with that juxtaposition of one, wanting to move things forward? I mean, look, the cluster 6 just opened up a couple of days ago, right? You've been talking about this for like 15 years. And so I'm just curious as to how do you understand the role of perpetual motion and basically it's almost like updating a computer. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Right? If it's sitting right there in front of you, versus the skill it takes in a complex manner to build out and understand scenarios that you can then deploy forward with other people and organizations.
I think what helps me a lot is teamwork. I have very good people that I'm working with. And I think that is really important to not only think about things on your own, but to constantly exchange it with other people so that they can question it, that they can improve these things. And it's very true what you say. So for me, being impatient and trying to move things forward, this process is sometimes very painful and very slow as I perceive it, but it is also very necessary. And I understand that if I want something too quickly, there will be mistakes, there will be oversights, and I try to sort of balance that out by telling it myself that this is necessary. Mostly, I would say, you can see it also, I think, within the publications. A lot of them are done with other people together, because I think it is very important to work with people to understand and profit from their knowledge and maybe also character traits that I simply don't have.
I appreciate that on many levels, because and one thing that struck me as you were saying that is that the irony is that we are, in almost every facet of life, it feels like, moving at warp speed, whether someone likes it or not. I think choice has sort of been extracted from this algorithm. It's moving, and we're going to have to get on board and understand how we fit in that scenario. And as part of that, and being passionate and finding conviction. So I want to understand, because I think this is a fantastic lesson for people in life, regardless of it. Maybe it's the best lesson for the younger generation. But the relationship that one has with their voice and conviction. Because some of the apathy that I talked about in my country here, I think is born from a fear that what I might say today will not stand the test of time even tomorrow. And as a byproduct of that, the risk that the proverbial I might take is actually, it's not that I don't say anything and I risk not making an impact. It's that I don't want the personal I don't want the persecution coming towards me individually. So I just say nothing and I'm stagnant. How have you understood and I either sort of reconvene the way in which criticism comes at you and your organization and or those that are just sitting on the opposite side of the table for the sake of just argument and debate? Has that been a skill you've had to build up over time where you've either stumbled and you had good, I guess, mentors and teammates? And I know I want to talk about Busek, your mentor, but help me understand that process, because that's something that I don't think we teach a lot, but it is about some level of resilience in the relationship that we have, not with others, but with our own voice and the way we communicate that and deploy it.
Yeah, it's again, a very good question that is hitting several nerves, I would say, because I think it's definitely a learning curve that is necessary to admit that you can be wrong. Because when you try to become some sort of expert in a certain field, in the beginning, nobody tells you that, the people that you maybe exchange with and that are experts in their field, they have not fallen from the sky. It's a process. It takes time. And here again comes the point. So not being very patient, that was really hard for me to say, like, okay, I work now in this and that field, on this and that topic. I'm an expert. And with this also in the one of my first jobs that I had in policy analysis, what I learned very quickly is that you are an expert when the lower third says it, but that doesn't mean that you're actually an expert. And so you can become an expert very quickly on that lower third that's stating you know something, because this is how communication and media works. But it doesn't mean that you are one. And it also doesn't mean that there's an endpoint to it, but it's a constant necessity to update yourself, to learn something new, to progress, and to admit that you were wrong and that you made mistakes. And this is not something that I learned. And I still remember one feedback when I was teaching, that one of my students said, look, we appreciate that you give all this input and try to answer each and every question, but it's okay to respond that you don't know certain things, because, I was then beating around the bush and like trying to give an answer without giving an answer, without revealing that I don't know the answer. And this was something that was very revealing for me. It's like, yeah, it's true. It's not necessary to know everything, and you don't have all the answers. Nobody has.
No, and so I want to follow that up. I mean, what a wonderful story. I mean, I think we've all been there, whether we want to relate it or not. And it doesn't mean that we've been professors or not. I have taught in higher ed, so I understand that the feedback loop that you get from students, that it can be quite reflective and timely, even when you don't expect it or maybe desire it in that moment. But I will say this as a first-generation German. My late father grew up in Germany during World War II, and so I feel like I can say this, but I'm curious about it with your German heritage in this regard, right? Because you said in there, you made that statement, you can be wrong. And what I have found, of course, it's a small sample size, right? But when you're a young boy, your father could represent an entire country with his opinion, depending upon the way in which he enforces that opinion. And he was a classic, what you might say, classic German from that period, where when you say you can be wrong, you talk about hitting a couple of nerves like that. That hits me in a way that makes me very reflective, because I remember thinking as a boy, I didn't have a choice. That wasn't even a choice. Right. Like, I was taught that why do something, like, why not do it perfect the first time? Like, if you're already setting it up to do it more than once, then you've already failed. And so I'm curious, and it's interesting because my father was a German so his brother had the engineering mind. He could build anything, but that was not my father. So he was not German in that way, right? With the way people will think, right? Sort of the efficiencies. Talk a little bit about your heritage and how you think that plays a role in the way in which you represent a broader region that extends beyond Germany.
I don't think it came actually from neither my father or my mother, because here again, I remember when I was it must have been shortly before I went to school. My mom and I sat down and would practice what is going to happen. I think it's very
scenarios
important.
Already.
Yeah, already more or less. Yeah. But, like, but to tell, I mean, I try to do that also with my son, that I try to explain him, look, these are things that are going to happen. So it's easier to prepare for that. Yeah. That you're not surprised by it. And that can be very scary, especially at a young age. And she told me how things are going to be and that there will be grades. And I still remember that I asked, okay, if I say something wrong, will I get a 6 grade? Yeah, which is the worst in Germany that you can get. And I don't know why that story now pops in my head when you mentioned that, but I still remember those cards. It was cardboards where she drew those 1 to 6 numbers on it, one for math, but also like, okay, this is how it will be. And she said, no, it's not like this, but there will be tests and then you will be graded. And in the beginning, you don't receive grades. So it's not something that comes out of this, but from like education. No, somehow it was there. I don't know why. I can't really tell you where this comes from, because I was not taught that everything needs to be perfect. I don't have a recollect that this was something that I couldn't make mistakes. But again,
That's a wonderful
I simply
story.
didn't want to lose. Yeah. This was really something that is, I didn't want, and that then includes also, I didn't want to be, bad in school or something like that.
Yeah. It was another challenge before you, and you wanted to. I love the story about your mom sitting you down, and you'd mentioned how you were the first in your family to go to university. And that makes me think, one of the dangers that I have found, and please correct me from your experience, and I don't think it's out of malice for anybody that works in, let's say, more of a heady space, right? A very intellectual space, is that sometimes we create out these sort of circular experiences and environments where we never sort of break out of that to understand the variables or the inputs from people that may not be a part of that. I'll use the word society, but I don't mean that in a, better or worse or some sort of judgment assignment. But what I love about the recollection of your mom talking with you about that is there's something organic about that I would imagine is harder when you are in the space that you are today to some degree. How do you keep yourself balanced whereby you honor the work that you've put in for your multiple degrees and the positions that you've had and the voice that people respect, while also not losing that sensibility of a young boy that says, I don't want to get a 6, right? Because that to me is how I think we understand really the scenarios at play here, not just something as an intellectual exercise that seems like a sport.
If we continue the journey through school and to academia, I was not always then very focused on only being the best and the brightest and whatsoever. I'm not even above average when it comes to grades after I transferred to high school. So I had a very tough time. But then, so there is also this sort of acceptance of your own limitation that comes to that. I think one should not use it as an excuse not to try to move forward, but one should also realize you cannot always be the best and brightest, and you cannot always win. And it's not possible to simply always have that success. There's a lot of detours that I had also in my academic career, and a lot of disappointments to the point where I was questioning if this is actually the right way, which means that I would say it's something that's balanced itself out to a certain extent, where I try to move forward, but also accept that there are limitations within me, but also within my environment that can cause this and that you simply can't overcome.
How do you discuss that with your son, if you don't mind me asking from a parent perspective? I'm a parent as well. I mean, the conversations I have at the pitch or at a basketball game, these sorts of things with other parents, and especially dads, there's a huge question mark that sort of hangs over the conversation, because we're entering, or we've already entered, this world where it's tough for us to be able to talk about prediction and scenario building, what the future is going to look like, how higher ed is going to be impacted, and what the state of higher education will be even within the next 5 years. And I'm curious if you are able to basically port over those conversations you had with your mother into the conversations that you have with your son. I don't even know how old your son is, but I'm just curious as to the way in which you communicate that, so that you still give him the wonderment? Because I battle with that. How much do I share and how much do I allow them to discover on their own? Because ultimately for me, I want them to continue to be explorers. And in doing so, they maintain some level of curiosity as opposed to being sort of sedentary and stuck in a rut because other people are stressed out or the fear of the unknown is overwhelming for them.
Well, he is not even 3 years old. He turns 3 in September.
My goodness, he's not only 3. Okay, so mine are 14 and going on 12. How do you think about that though? Because he's even at a different, like the gap between your son and even my 11-year-old daughter is massive in the conversations, because higher ed for him will absolutely be different than it will be for my daughter and son.
The interesting thing is that I can have conversations with him because he's very talkative. And this is, for me, is fascinating. But I forget at a certain point that I cannot really rationalize with him, if you know what I mean. That's like, he's still not 3 years old. So even if he responds to the things and we have conversations, I cannot assume that there is a certain understanding of the logic that I'm trying to build. Nevertheless, so that I'm currently working again with a colleague on an idea for a children's book, how to sort of very subtly try to bring a topic that we believe is important to children the age of my son. And I talk with him about it, and he tries to understand that there is what I'm trying to say. I have the feeling, because he questions it not only with why, but also with follow-ups of why is this and that character, for instance, bad. So we try to talk about these kind of things. But of course, I mean, I constantly, because I'm not sure if what I do here is right. And I'm also very impatient with him. And I'm also very frustrated if he doesn't do the things that I want him to do, which is probably his only job that he has at the moment, to just question that. But I'm very impatient, and I'm still, so there's a German band that I adore, the German songwriter, and he has this line in one of my favorite songs that I listened to long before I ever thought that I would become a dad, which says, basically translated, thinking about my father and I hope that I'm better. And that resonates a lot with me. Still, oftentimes I'm not sure if I am. And this is really a struggle.
Yeah. Can I ask you, I hope you don't mind, but have you, because of the way in which you're communicating that, sharing it, I'd be curious, have you in your own way, maybe not formally, but maybe on a whiteboard, have you played any scenarios out based on that song? Because when you said that, I understand exactly what you mean, right? There are those moments where I understand that I have been, and I think people will just assume, oh, that's the German in him, right? He was quite aggressive in his opinion, kind of a thing. And that's not, it's neither here nor there. But I am curious if you've been able to use the tools that you have to even think about the scenarios whereby your son might resonate with that song in the next 20 years, or how do you correct it now that he's, not even 3 yet?
I totally wing the whole thing, which is terrible, probably.
Isn't there great irony in that? It feels like there's great irony in that.
It is, now that you mention it, because I never thought about it, I never thought about that this is actually something where I could, and I learn certain things on the go, and I understand certain things then on the go, and I hope that I am able to correct that. But I very often also approach things where I don't know how that will be, because I don't have that experience, where I say, okay, I think about possibilities that are there, but I don't map out exactly how it's going to go, because this is the scenario building work. Yeah? You think about trajectories that could be there to be better prepared for when reality actually happens, but you don't map out the exact thing, how it's going to go down. And I didn't do that for becoming a father. I had no idea what that will do with me and how I will be and what kind of father I want to be. And I probably should have done that, but I didn't. So I have homework after.
Here's what I would say in my experience, and take it for what it's worth. But I do connect and understand exactly what you're saying. And I would actually say it's not an either or linear experience at all. It's an and. And the way that I have combated my own level of, and I don't have no clue if this is inherent in the genes of people born in that part of the world at all. May not, may just be complete coincidence. But my counter to that, to counterbalance, has always been to love with great affection. So in those moments, so in essence, I'm hoping that I'm sort of implanting sort of the verbal acknowledgement of affection, of being like my son's dad and loving him in those moments, right? So that when we do have moments where I am maybe a little bit more impatient and stern in my conviction about a lesson that I really hope that he learns in that moment, it balances out for him and he takes me serious because he knows on the other side of that, sort of on the, when the sun rises tomorrow, dad's right there. And that to me, whether that's right or wrong, that's been sort of how I've approached that. I'd like to think he might not hear that song that you referenced and think that pertains to him, but that also could be my blind spot as well.
Yeah, I think showing this is, I don't know if it's also maybe a generational thing, but showing much more affection than my father did towards me, is really something that is, so I'm not having trouble with this. Yeah. I can yell at him in the 1 minute and hug him the next minute. If he allows it, because I mean, he's very stubborn.
He says, "No, Dad."
Comes from, yeah, it happens. Like, go away. Don't do that. I don't want to be hugged now. So this is
let's
just fine,
transition to impact it outside of family. But I also think people can construct their family and the influences. But let's talk a little bit about Erhard Busek and your mentor. And I don't really want to stay sort of on the surface of this because I think, this is where I would love for you to sort of share your perspective on the various roles that he played for you in your development and utilizing time as the variable, the context, right? That at that point in your life, at that point in your career, what was it about him that, and I know he passed away, I believe, like right as Russia was going into Ukraine, starting the war, that it was, sad in that regard because of all that he had worked towards and contributed. But talk a little bit about Busek and the impact he had on you and how you think he still lives within you and what you do and the way in which you work today.
So for me, I have not learned more from any single person than Erhard Busek, I have to say, and important things, because he was always asking questions. He was always curious, even at a high age. And this is something that is related to what I mentioned earlier, and that if you are expert in a certain field, you have to continue to ask questions. And he had this vast knowledge. And the first time I ever met him, it was in Maribor, Slovenia. There was a summer school. I was invited as a speaker, and that was in 2012. And I met him at dinner. And I remember he looked at the program, and then he saw the title of my lecture that I was about to give the next day, I believe. And then he asked me something, okay, what do I mean with this title? And that was, for me, it was like fascinating. So there is this former vice chancellor of Austria sitting down with me. He asks the question. Yeah? It's not me who should be asking him the questions, and because he's so much more experienced and knowledgeable, etc. No. He asks the questions. He has done that with me, but constantly questioned also, professional choices that I made within the institute, and constantly challenged things, which was also great because it helped me in many ways. We also had disagreements about certain things, and this of course also, again, in this working together with someone, that produces better outcomes than if you would make decisions on your own. And I learned the most from him to stay curious, and asking questions is okay. Yeah. Even if you're an expert, you ask questions to learn something, but also ask the question, what can I do for you? What can we provide to alleviate the situation, and things like that. And this was very, very important. And then also, of course, the possibility to see all and meet all these various people that he knew. He had this extensive network of brilliant people. And I only scratched the surface. I had not enough time, unfortunately, to work with him, but it was an absolute pleasure, and I learned a tremendous amount of things that I still utilize today.
I hope you're enjoying today's interview. If you'd like to learn more about my work or advertise on one of my shows, you can visit me at drrodberger.com, or you can visit me in the lab, as I like to call it, at narrativestack.ai. You can also purchase my book, The Narrative Edge, Authentic Storytelling That Meets the Moment, wherever books are sold. And now, back to the interview. Looking back, do you recall that you knew in the moment the impact that he would have on you? Was it at that dinner? Because there have been times in my life where something in me said, pay extra attention to what's going on right now with this individual. Like this is a pivotal, poignant moment in your life, and what they're sharing is not just being passed off as sheer conversation over a glass of wine. There's something really valuable in here. And that in essence, sometimes it's like, I feel very lucky in that regard. Did you know in the moment, or did it occur to you after his passing and sort of the state of the world that it really was highlighted?
It's hard to say if I'm not ascribing something in retrospect to it. Do remember that I was really, I was moved by the fact that I was recognized that I have some sort of expertise, because otherwise he wouldn't ask that question. Yeah? A person like him wouldn't ask that question. But absolutely not in the sense that, because I didn't expect that we would like meet and then even work together, because I was just invited as a speaker. I was living in Berlin back then, having my own little company, trying to survive on my own in that policy, academia, political advisory world. And that was one of the stints I did. Yeah. So they invited me to do that. I could show expertise. I would get a honorarium, and that was one thing. So I didn't expect it at all, but I felt recognized, sort of, yeah? Because I mean, it also, when you come from what I told you, you constantly also sort of question if you're not a fraud, yeah? And if not everybody else is much smarter than you are, and you just sort of made it, now you have to move through. There is a wonderful book series that I read when I was a kid. The main character was Skeev, and he tried to become a magician, sorcerer, something like that. And he faked his way through this world. And sometimes I feel like that character still. It becomes less and less. But back then I was afraid, if I say the wrong thing, or even if I just respond, he might just find out that I'm not an expert.
You might score a 6.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say? What is the cost? I think that's such wonderful insight that I don't want to roll over. I'd rather honor that insight in what would be the cost if you acknowledged that you're not the fraud. And by the way, I think if people haven't experienced that, I think they're lying to themselves. I think it's just human beings. You walk into a room and you walk in with a feeling maybe of expertise and some confidence, and you turn around and all of a sudden there's Busek who wants to sit with you and have a conversation. And immediately, whatever you know is about a tenth of what he has known in the last few years, right? I mean, it's just, he knows more in one conversation than you could have studied, right? Just sheer age and experience. And I'm curious as to what is the cost now as a dad and these sorts of things? Like, what is the cost? Because for myself, I know that if I've gone in and I've over-prepared for something out of anxiety because I don't want to fall into some trap, and then it goes well, I almost tell myself, well, now I have to do that every time in this situation or scenario because it worked the first time, and I can't get too full of myself or just assume that the ground will be still beneath my feet. I have to think as if it's moving, and I have to prepare for that.
I think the bigger danger that I would see in this is actually that sometimes there is no possibility to prepare to the extent that I want to. And I'm also generally I would say I'm a hedonistic person as well, which means it's just a fancy word for trying to mask that I'm also very lazy sometimes. And then you're not very well prepared. or you haven't properly done what you should have done and you get away with it, that the lesson then is, well, I can get away with it. And this is dangerous. So from time to time, I think it's very good and very necessary actually to get such an humbling experience that someone else is much smarter than you and you can't keep up. And if you don't prepare properly and if you don't put in the work, everything will crumble and you will be exposed as the fraud that you still not are, but nevertheless, it's a good reminder to stay humble and continue also to work on yourself.
And it's really, it's a bit of a sidecar to what you mentioned earlier, that if a third of the audience finds you to be an expert, right? If you've convinced a third of the audience, then you are an expert. And to your point, I think humans run the risk of, you can fall prey to that praise that may or may not be warranted, moving forward. All right. So I want to pivot here in the moments that we have left in our conversation, Sebastian, and talk a little bit about how the world is shifting. And this is, again, my perspective, and I'd love your correction on this. But if I'm you and and someone said, what do you think's going on in Sebastian's mind with the way in which the world is rapidly moving? One scenario or one sort of observation might be, wow, people are finally coming to the party. They're finally starting to understand what we've been talking about for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And now maybe we can start to work together on how we understand a world that continues to grow just in population and the impacts on what we thought were norms, right? Immigration, all these different, the impact on our economies. Where are you in that perspective when it comes to getting people to understand the importance of the work that you do, and that your organization does, and have the conversations truly been changing in a way that tells you, or is an indicator, that people are doing their homework, they're more open to understanding these complex issues? Or is it just sheer panic and anxiety from people that are starting to wake up and say, I can't ignore this anymore?
Funny coincidence, because earlier today I was actually having a conversation with another colleague of mine, because in the morning I heard that it's the 10th anniversary of that alleged coup against Erdogan, that cemented his power. And we were actually talking about, we're not very good at our job because it is still like this, even though we're not working on Turkey, but that was 10 years ago, and he's still in power and nothing has changed. And people will most likely re-elect him. And they re-elected Trump. They voted for Brexit at that 10 years ago. And still nothing has changed. Populist anti-EU rhetoric is still something that is not proven wrong enough, although it has been catastrophic for the UK and its economy. And in this case, I think I'm not so optimistic, and we live probably in the worst case scenario at the moment. I have to say, okay, it can always get worse, but it's not something that I see. We're not ahead of the curve.
Have we not hit the bottom yet? Are you saying that there's still more room to fall?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Yeah.
Yeah, I share in that, not because I'm a cynic by nature. I just think that I am guilty of, and I would never trade this, having conversations like people like you and other people around the world, and having seen things in front of my own eyes that makes me question that, to be blindly ignorant and think that, I can only protect my homestead, I think is antiquated, to say the least. How do you prevent yourself? Because I think you're only human. I would think that there are either some days or it's a larger conversation that you don't share with other people. It's the kind of thing you think as you put your head down at night, which is to say, at what point do you burn out? Because you've got your foot is sort of on the gas and on the brake at the same time. One, to make sure that people are aware that are, sort of still needing to fall to understand the gravity and the weight of what we're talking about, and yet trying to create momentum enough for there to be change to push back against this authoritarian virus that has been spreading across the globe. How do you avoid burnout in that regard without just sort of, wiping your hands of it and doing something different?
Well, I think one thing that sort of helps is seeing, what's the alternative? Can I now, should I lie down and just accept the fact that we are on this trajectory, or am I trying to do something against it? I know that I will not overall change this development, but at least I can try to contribute a little bit to it, hoping that it will sort of change its course at a certain point. And it also helps to know who you're doing it for, the people you love, especially now, of course. Again, my son, my family, but also other friends. And it's something that for me, when I travel to Ukraine, I have a lot of friends there and see what really a worse situation can look like when there are red alarms constantly, your shell rockets us, drones hitting your flats, etc. Lives being destroyed. It's something that helps to put it in a perspective. So I'm not there yet, but I don't have an overall recipe for it. And there are days where I say, okay, I can't anymore. So the only thing is, again, probably what is helping is like, what's the alternative? I can't stop. I can't lie down and give up. I have to move forward. I have to go on.
See, and I would say, I agree with that, but I would say that to me, that is because you have a thirst for learning and you haven't turned that off. And I sit and wonder for myself, because I think, how can my neighbors, community members, how is it they can turn a blind eye? And is it because they had to make a choice, that they basically diverted away from the tracks of learning and they went down a different path along with the railroad? Because now we're entering, I think that we're sort of in this age of entitlement, right? And I'm going to own that. And I'm going to discard learning, and I'm going to say that I'm entitled, right? Without an understanding of what it took to even have these opportunities put before us as a civilized, planet and world. But to me, my fear is that there's a death of learning, because with AI, I mean, if we think about education very broadly, I mean, this is very simplistic, but to me, it's always been about the pursuit of an answer and what we've learned along the way, right? There's a question, there's something out there that we don't know, and we're pursuing that over time. Well, if you take that out of the equation and the answers are already before us through technology and AI and the neural networks basically that are being built with these AI models, I'm sure you've seen it. I see it every day. Well, then what happens then? Where's that motivation, that intrinsic motivation to learn, to get up in the morning because we're curious? And if we're not curious, I think we're highly susceptible to what is going on. And so, well, people will say, well, no, we can get back to normal. Our definition of normal is I think the problem was it was static, and if we had blinders on, and now we have to understand that we live in a very fluid world, that what was last week is not this week, and that's going to change people. And I would imagine that is impacting your work as well and your colleagues, even behind the scenes. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And I think, the importance and the lesson I got from Erhard, we need to continue to ask questions. And if we don't ask questions where there is an illusion that there is an answer to everything, because when you talk with chatbots and AI, it will always respond to you like, great question, here is this and that. And it takes you, actually, sometimes it takes you further away from knowing more. And this is very dangerous, that on the one hand, you don't want to educate yourself, and maybe also not, because I think asking questions is important, but I'm absolutely convinced that there are dumb questions, because that's also a thing that people say, to try to encourage children to ask questions. Yeah, there are no dumb questions. There are super dumb questions. And we need to find a way to continue to encourage people to ask questions, but also not to only dumb questions.
Yeah, see, my translation of of a dumb question would be, in my experience, is that for me, when I think that there's a dumb question that's come my way, it's because there's been a lack of investment on that person, their part, to think, maybe not even critically, but with some level of an aperture that is opened beyond their own domain, to take into consideration my world, or where whatever the circumstances are. And so hence it feels lazy in that regard. Yeah. Is that a fair translation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Sebastian, I can't tell you, you've got me thinking beyond just this conversation, and you've been very kind to go down different roads. And I think it's incredibly important to the very point we're talking about, in the world where it's not about being cynical. I think we're just being realist in the way in which we're seeing the world around us. And I think people need that. It's informative. I think it also is normalizing so that the way people feel inside their minds that they don't share with their spouses or their families or their colleagues, they can say, there are other people that are seeing this as well. In essence, I'm not going crazy. And sometimes we need that affirmation so we can then figure out how we want to partake and hopefully contribute to a better world moving forward. And we want to thank Sebastian Schäffer. What a fantastic way to inject thoughtfulness, community, and passion for not just the homestead, but for a region and more than just someone's backyard. I find you incredibly thoughtful, and I look forward to future conversations. This has been the Dr. Rod Berger Show, presented by Fair Observer. If you're looking for independence, diversity, and debate, go to fairobserver.com and understand the world one perspective at a time. You can also find my book, The Narrative Edge, Authentic Storytelling That Meets the Moment, wherever books are sold. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger. This has been another episode of the Dr. Rod Berger Show, presented by my friends at Fair Observer. If you're looking for independence, diversity, and debate, you can go to fairobserver.com, where we understand the world one perspective at a time.